Gambling addiction is incredibly harmful, and it is dangerous for so many reasons. I, however, believe the most dangerous aspect of a gambling addiction is the ability for the addict to keep his addiction or her addiction secret for such a long period of time. I've spoken before about outward symptoms of addiction. Now, if you're an alcoholic, these symptoms are quite often fairly obvious. Certainly with most forms of narcotics, there will be outward physical signs that you are suffering from said addiction. However, until you reach the absolute epitome of rock bottom, it is perfectly feasible that a gambling addict can hide their addiction for many years, which helps perpetuate it and dig a deeper and deeper hole. So why do we keep our gambling addictions so secret? Well, that's what I want to talk about in today's video. Firstly, just say hi. I hope you're keeping safe, hope you're keeping sane. My name's Phil. If you're new around here, hello. If you're not, then welcome back, and thank you for clicking on this video and for your support by liking, subscribing, commenting, doing all that great YouTube stuff. And there is a link to my Patreon in the description below should you wish to support me in that way. Thank you very much, and on with the rest of this ramble. So why is there so much shame attached to gambling? Well, I think societally there is always this stigma, and it's backed up by a significant number of cliches. You know, a fool and his money are soon parted. You know, gambling's a mug's game. There's only one winner. You never see a poor bookie. All of these trite cliches about gambling and why those people who partake in gambling are such fools. But there's a trap at play here, and this is the reason that I believe we shouldn't necessarily feel shame about our gambling. We are fed a lie. Gambling is promoted as a lie. It's promoted everywhere. Every TV show has gambling associated with it. Every advert break has adverts for bookies or for online casinos. You know, most football teams now have some form of gambling sponsorship. It is almost impossible to escape gambling promotion. And how is it promoted? Well, unlike other very heavily regulated forms of advertising, gambling can be freely promoted as a fun and relatively harmless social activity. Dare I say, even a cool activity, if indeed cool is a word that young people still use. Yes, of course, there are the obligatory, you know, when the fun stops and gamble responsibly messages, but we all know how hollow and trite these actually are. But generally speaking, it's still free to be promoted as this harmless and, like I say, cool, you know, bit of fun, really, bit of light-hearted entertainment, something to enhance your experience of sport and so on. Dare I just take a slight aside here and address this idea of it being a sort of a cool or trendy or whatever young people say these days form of entertainment. I can't see how anything that is instantly accessible, ultimately freely available, and takes absolutely zero effort can in any way be cool. Surely anything that is perceived as you know, cool, and I feel I've overused that word horrifically, has to be something that requires some level of effort, achievement or attainment on the part of the person partaking. But there you go, that's a mere aside. So we're fed this lie, you know, and we're encouraged to have a bet. We're actively encouraged to have bets with things like free promotions, you know, bet £5, get £10 in free bets, you know, 50% match and all this stuff on the online casinos. We're actively encouraged just to try it out, just to give it a go, and that's acceptable. It's acceptable then to have another bet. It's acceptable to bet reasonably regularly. However, once we have fallen into this trap, which we are led into, there becomes this stigma around the fact that we've lost control. When you get to that point where you realise that you are no longer in control of your habit, of your addiction, of gambling, then there is suddenly this shame. And all these cliches, which are, you know, date back as long as I can think, all these cliches suddenly fall out of the woodwork. They come crawling out of the woodwork, you know, to help suppress your expression. You know, they stop you reaching out for help because all you can hear is it's a mug's game, you know, a fool and his money, you know, never see a poor bookie, all this stuff, and it stops us from opening up. And it's incredibly important, certainly in the early stages of recovery, we do open up, that we do talk to people, and there are many reasons for that. Coming out, talking to people about our addiction expressing our addiction and opening up about it, gives us, not only does it lift that secrecy, we no longer have something we can hide behind. Right? It also helps form a support network around us. Now, of course, not everyone that you speak to, particularly if you've caused them harm through your addiction, either knowingly or unknowingly, is going to necessarily be supportive of you. However, just to continue the lie in order to protect those or maintain a relationship is futile. The relationship will be doomed with that person anyway, because it doesn't matter how long you hide this for, at some point it's going to tip and it's going to come out. So coming out, talking about it, help build a support network. It has people looking out for you in a very active sense, i.e. you can no longer gamble around these people because they know that that is your vice. But it also, like I say, gives you support and it helps us keep on the right path when it comes to recovery. So this is quite a paradox, isn't it? If we take a step away from gambling for a moment and we look at something that is considered incredibly highly addictive, heroin, for example. If heroin was advertised the way that gambling is advertised, as being a sort of a fun, relatively harmless form of entertainment that can enhance our experiences. If heroin was societally acceptable as the norm, if it was legal and promoted and available on every high street, then there wouldn't be such a stigma attached to heroin addiction. But yet we are fed and we are promoted gambling, but there's somewhat of a stigma coming out and saying, I can no longer control this. It's a horrible paradox, and it leads us to these feelings of shame, which ultimately prevent us from getting the help we need. I will, however, take a bit of a turn here and say, you're not a mug if you gamble. Okay, you're not a fool, you're not an idiot. However, if having accepted your gambling addiction, having come to terms with the fact that you are no longer in control of your gambling, if you then continue to, bury your head in the sand, if you don't open up, if you don't talk, if you don't seek help in whatever form that comes in, then you are being a fool. You're being a fool to yourself, and you are being a fool and dare I say, duplicitous to those closest to you. As always, I say, this is not coming from a position of a high horse. I'm not preaching here. I'm not, saying, oh, look, I'm better than you. No, I did this many, many times, all right? And I was a fool for too long. And the more I denied my gambling addiction, the more I refused to acknowledge it, the more I refused to talk about it and do anything about it, the bigger hole I dug for myself. And this is a hole I'm digging myself out to this day. Okay, so yes, fool is not a criticism. However, you are doing yourself a massive disservice if, having acknowledged a loss of control in this instance, that you don't address it. Okay, so don't dwell on what other people are going to think. Most people will be more supportive than you expect. Yes, of course, not everyone will be, but that unfortunately is just, that's the nature of the beast. You can't do so much damage to yourself and to your relationships and to everything for so long and then suddenly expect to just kind of come clean and suddenly everything's all right. I spoke in my last video about how the fallout from an addiction and the very early stages of recovery are often far, far harder than the negatives of the addiction itself. But it is merely just a stepping stone on the path to recovery where things will get better and they will continue to get better. And as I alluded to in my last video, realistically, recovery is the only option, because if we project ourselves into the future, if we don't get into recovery, if we don't accept this, if we don't, ignore the stigma and talk about this, then what's our life going to look like in 6 months, dare I say, a year, 5 years from now? It's unlikely to be a particularly rosy picture. And yeah, my life would be so much better now had I never gambled. But, how bad could it have been if I didn't, decide to have my 79th attempt at recovery and actually do something more proactive about it. And if you do want to take more proactive steps to get into recovery, there's tons of videos on this channel. So I'll leave this with a bit of self-promotion. If you think that was interesting, like, subscribe, comment, do all that great stuff. Like I say, Patreon link in the description. Yeah, I'm unashamedly plugging myself. There you go, look at that. But I'll leave that with you. Have a great weekend. I'll try and, protect yourself tonight. If you're getting paid weekly, make sure you don't take all your money out with you and gamble it like I always used to. All right, again, no judgment, just experience. Stay safe, stay sane. I'll speak to you all soon. In a bit.